Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to open up April's meeting of the Conservation Commission. We are being recorded, and it does record our sound also, so if you're over there and you're having sidebars, it'll pick you up, and the people at home will hear your conversation, so just so you're aware. Did the members get a chance to read the minutes of May 2nd, 2017? If there were no errors or omissions, I'll entertain a motion to accept them and place them on file.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. One second though, let me, on the May 2nd meetings, Ben Gahagan, I would move to drop the I out of his name, universally throughout the document.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. You're welcome. January 16th, 2018, those minutes, did the members have a chance to read them? Did they note any errors or omissions?
No.
I will entertain a motion to accept them and place them on file.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Aye. The February 20th meeting, minutes of 2018, did the members get a chance to read those? And if they noted no errors or omissions, I'll entertain a motion.
I had some questions in a couple parts of it. We can go through it now, or maybe I could...
No, let's go through it right now if you want.
Well, the third item there, Bruce,
Yes.
I just didn't understand the first couple sentences. I think there's some cutting and pasting that went on there that makes it a little confusing.
Are you talking about DEP and the environmental part of it?
Yeah.
Well, they got involved in an issue that wasn't really theirs, and it's when buildings go up on pilings on Plum Island. So they wanted a statement from the building inspector saying that it was going to go up on pilings or it was compliant, and he wasn't ready to do that yet. He didn't have a submission. So he quoted 780, quoted the state building code to him, and went as far as he was willing to go. The applicant, Tom Hughes, well, actually the representative, Tom Hughes, sent that in to DEP, and evidently they were satisfied with it because they sent the DEP number out. So that's what that was about. We can clarify that a little bit if you think it needs it.
Well, you know, you read it, Representative Tom Hughes of Hughes Environmental Substantial Improvement. That sentence there.
Yeah, the issue was substantial improvement. It went right into substantial improvement. So in other words, that house that was on Annapolis Way that we went a couple of months on, the Star House, if they did a 50% fair market value improvement to that structure alone, pre-construction, then that whole structure would go up on pilings. So there's a foundation report that has to go with that. There's a FEMA document that's about 4 pages long that these guys go through on the island now, because when they get close, we've had some where they've actually been very close, then they've gone over, and we've had to force them up on pilings, and that's pretty painful to do that mid-stride when no one's counting on it. So that's what the substantial improvement's about, Jim, but we'll clarify that a little bit. Do you want to hold off on these minutes till next month?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah,
let's hold off on these.
I think I get the gist of it, but the wording is a little confusing, the sentences.
All right, then why don't we table these minutes till next month, and if you have some comments you want to get to me,
Yeah.
we'll incorporate them into the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. We have a continued notice of intent to raise an existing home and to construct a new single-family home for Brian and Kelly Kelly at 335th Street. I received a request for a continuance from the applicant's representative, and it would be my recommendation to grant it. Do I have a second?
Sure.
All those in favor? Aye. We have a continued notice of intent to construct a single-family home from Plum Island Blue LLC at 17 C Fordham Way. I did not hear from them, but it would be my recommendation that we grant a continuance to the May 2nd date.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have a notice of intent for the near-shore disposal of spoils dredged from the Piscataqua River Turning Basin project from the town of Newbury, and the near-shore disposal site is off of Plum Island Beach. Hi, David.
Good evening, my name is David Smith. I'm with GZA Geoenvironmental, and I'm here representing the town of Newbury, that is the proponent and applicant on this project. And this project is an Army Corps of Engineers project to dredge approximately 700,000 cubic yards of sediment up from the Piscataqua River, the end of the Piscataqua River in a turning basin. And of that 700,000 cubic yards, we are proposing to take 300,000 cubic yards and divide it in half to the previously authorized disposal sites, one off of Newbury, off of Plum Island, and the other one off of Salisbury. So this notice of intent is to permit that near-shore disposal of 150,000 cubic yards in a previously authorized location. So the Army Corps, in their original plan, I think it goes back to 2000, early 2000s, I think. Their original plan is to take this sediment that is, majority of it is sand, clean sand, and dump it offshore at their previously permitted disposal site between the Outer Shoals and Boone Island, about 300 feet of water. So the Corps is always amenable to having this material be used for beneficial reuse. So I think it was around 2012, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Coastal Zone Management, along with the municipalities of Newbury, Newburyport, Salisbury, also Hull and Situate, kind of got all together and expressed an interest in this material. So since that time, there has been an evaluation done by the Corps. The Corps did a full environmental assessment and they did a full environmental assessment and then basically a feasibility report. And in the end of that was issued in July 2014, it was determined that it was finding of no significant impact, meaning that they would, the material that is predominantly sand is suitable to be placed at the nearshore disposal sites. So the other communities of Hull and Situate are also part of this larger project team that's going to be taking some of that material as well. They're actually going to be putting it on the beach down in Hull and in Tasket Beach and then also Situate. So they're, between the volumes of sand between the three areas, one being Salisbury, Newbury, and then two in Hull and Situate being third, is there's quite a bit of need and not enough volume. So Hull gets first dibs if they can get permitted in time, and then the area up here would be second. So we have a pretty good shot at getting this. So the material, like I said, is predominantly sand. It's been tested back in 2007, 2009, and 2016 with many probes, borings to figure out where ledge and rock is and to get a sense of what the material is. And then it was also tested in 2017, both grain size. All those previous tests were all grain size. And 2017 was both tested for grain size and for chemical characteristics. So after the end result of this is basically that it's suitable for actually onshore beach placement like those other communities down south, but also for nearshore disposal. All the results are included within the narrative of the NOI. In addition to all this testing, the Army Corps also did some testing in the nearshore disposal sites, both off of Salisbury and Newbury. The material, you know, is sand, and it was also some significant surveys were done for shellfish and also for regular fish as well in that time frame. So as part of this process that the Corps did, it, you know, has pretty much been vetted by a lot of regulatory agencies up to this point. In addition to filing this notice of intent, we sent a copy of this to Division Marine Fisheries, also DEP, as you know, and then Natural Heritage as required. So we did get back letters from Natural Heritage just recently. They've indicated a no take on the impacts for the nearshore disposal. Division Marine Fisheries came back with a condition, a time of year restriction that would be so no disposal between February 15th and June 30th. So this is going to be, if all the planets get aligned, this project gets funded, it's looking to be done hopefully this fall in October, and then be completed before the time of year restriction in February. This also, in addition to the Piscataway River dredge, we also included the sediment to be dredged from the Merrimack River. And that's in the works also by the Corps. It's 200,000 cubic yards, and that material would be divided equally between the two disposal sites, Salisbury and Newbury. And that's in the future, but we wanted to include this because if in the event it fully gets funded this year, Core goes full steam ahead and does get dredged, we want to make sure at least there was a place for that material to go that could be beneficial use. Merrimack River has been dredged like 15 times since the 60s, used at these disposal sites pretty much for most of the times. I didn't go back all the way in history, but I do know in 1993, 125,000 cubic yards was placed off in the Newbury site. 96, 125,000 was placed in Salisbury, and in 1999, 145,000 was placed off of Plum Island. The last time the river was dredged was 2009, 2010, and that went onshore. So hopefully when the next dredging does occur by the Corps, that, you know, we can actually put this material on the beach because it is, 90% sand, but it does cost money to do that, and it needs a lot of support, both local and state. So we at least wanted to be able to include it to be placed in the nearshore disposal sites. So I think that's pretty much the project. Take any questions?
Should have dozens of questions, but it's a rather simple project.
Yeah.
Difficult part of it's taking place up in Maine, New Hampshire, so.
That's right, yeah.
The permit, is it a 5 or 10 year permit? Do you know?
Which permit?
The permitting of the dump zone.
Well, there's different timeframes depending on the permit. So the order of conditions that we get from the Conservation Commission is 3 years, right?
Obviously. Yeah.
Chapter 91 and Army Corps, that's a 5-year. The Army Corps of Engineers that we submitted, good question, because their GP ends in 2020. So I don't know if that can be extended beyond the normal general permit. We'd have to see when the time
Well,
comes.
they carry over.
Yeah, a lot of times they do. The Corps permits the Massachusetts General Permit in 5-year increments, 5 or 10. So the last time it was done, all the projects that were permitted previously, as long as you write a letter and say it's in the works, and contract's been authorized or whatever, then they'll carry it over. May have to amend it. And then obviously we also filed an an expanded environmental notification form with MIPA. That's should have actually received comments Friday, or the certificate on Friday. We didn't, but that's in the works, and that's a 5-year.
We've talked about it quite a few times. We have a lot of time behind this, but everybody else doesn't. How are they going to bring that down here and place it?
Yeah, so they're going to mechanically dredge up in the Piscataway, and they're going to bring it down here by barges, and then they will place it, it's probably very similar to what's been done on the river, although they'll use a hopper, dredge where they'll actually suck it up and then open up the barge and let it drop out. This will probably be the same type of scow. They'll go into the disposal sites, and actually so you can see the drawing here. This is the Salisbury site, this is the Newbury, and a blow up of the Newbury site there. So my understanding from the Corps is they'll basically transit through the disposal areas, open up the doors, and just basically keep motoring along. And it's going to kind of go in windrows, and it's going to be placed in about 19 to 24 feet of water, mineral water, both sides.
Dave, what we want to avoid, or what I'd like to avoid, is the mounding of this material out there. And with their contractors, and fuel oil is money, I'm afraid they'll go to the end of the dump site and dump it. So I've had a brief conversation with Mark Abel, and he suggested that we work on some type of grid pattern, and you only allow so much in each grid, and then he can get that into the bid documents, and then the contractor will be aware that you can't go out there and start mounding, because we don't want that wave deflection to be, coming around a mountain out there.
I agree. I guess if that's a condition that's imposed, I would just want to make sure through the project manager for the Corps that this is doable. I'd hate to have something be conditioned that it's just totally impossible.
Well, that's why I brought it up to Mark at first. He didn't seem to think it was a big deal, but he's in planning, so we'll see,
Yeah, Erica might be a good, we've been talking to, last name, but I can get you that contact info.
Okay.
So you also have to realize that they need, that dredge scow is going to be pretty full. So they're going to be drawing probably, I'm going to guess, maybe 6, 9 feet of water. So you know, they're gonna be in 19, 24 feet of water, so that if they dump it all in one spot, they run a risk of getting sort of stuck, and I don't think they wanna do that.
Questions, guys, comments from the board?
Doug, for me, I mean, this is the first time this type of operation's happened since I've been on the board. Could you briefly summarize why this is necessary for the town's viewpoint?
I think this is a great opportunity from the town's viewpoint, because what we've been doing in the past is we're taking stuff out of the Merrimack River, we're taking stuff that's down there that's in our sediment supply or in our sediment source anyway, and just moving it around, kind of playing games with it. This is 150,000 cubic yards. In 150,000 cubic yards, it's going on the other side of the river that will make its way to us with a total drift that is not in our system right now. It's almost all good sand. The reason we didn't want to put it in the beach, as Dave alluded to, is number one is cost. Number two is there is some difference in grain size there. Plum Island's pretty homogeneous, it's pretty even with its grain size, and something we didn't want to do is get that mixture of grain sizes up on the beach. So that's why we're going to put it in the near shore in this particular one. We didn't even contemplate putting it on the beach, but it's a great shot in the arm to have in our system. We're dumping it in a high energy area. It's not within, it's right adjacent to your surf clam and your shellfish designated areas, but it's not on top of them. It's a high energy area. And really the things that we're concerned about, when you read about the resource area and 310 CMR, it's fish runs. And it's so high energy out there that there's not much out there, and along with the time of year restriction, likely whatever's out there is going to recover quickly. It's used to being, disturbed out there, especially during storms and other events.
The idea for putting it in these, close near shore locations, like Doug says, is that we anticipate that the material is gonna find its way onto the beach. It's not all the material is gonna find its way. And I think in prior studies that have been done, you'd find maybe 40% has come on, but, we have an opportunity that's available to be able to, take this sand and try to help nourish the beach, so.
This is you guys, if I remember correctly, had a winter flounder time of year, is that February 15th to June 15th?
That's what the time of year restriction is, that was, right, imposed. Yeah.
Did that help them?
Yeah, it did, thank you.
Okay.
You said a shot in the arm, is it a shot in the arm or a Band-Aid?
For Plum Island, it's a Band-Aid, yeah. It's 150,000 cubic yards, it's not on the beach. It will have some beneficial use, but like Dave says, it won't all come ashore, and there's gonna be a mixed grain size, so, even in a perfect world, you wouldn't get it all ashore.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board? Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak on this project? If there are no other questions or concerns from the board, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the project as designated.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any special order, other than the order against mounding, and we'll work that out, is there anything that the board wanted to see in the orders of conditions? You got the time of year restriction?
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yep.
totally outside of this. So,
Okay, we're all set
The
there.
drop site on that, are they going to, technically, I know that's the old permit that was granted years ago,
Correct.
but that's not the hot spot. That needs to go south, probably
Yeah.
about 200 yards.
Yeah, well,
We tried to drag that, so you want to tell them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
go ahead.
if you want to be abbreviated, it's been tried before. And the trouble is with expanding these areas, both Salisbury tried to do it to the north and Newbury tried to do it to the south. This is back in the mid-90s.
So that's gonna take 10 years to change it.
Sort of, you got the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think time is a big issue here,
Yeah,
yeah.
we started to bump up against marine fisheries, and we knew there was a little bit more work we had to do, and we didn't think we could pull over the finish line.
Gotta go that way anyway.
Yeah, when the Army Corps says they're ready to go with the funding, they're gonna be ready to go whether we are or not, so. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure. They're gonna prove that out this fall no matter what. The bid document's gonna go out this fall, and then the funding will start. I think they're relatively certain they're gonna get something from this. So this is the one that's tied up in the level, it's gonna be 2 walls, this is the pilot program. So this will get more
I got
complicated.
it.
Yeah. We have an amended notice of intent for the installation of a floating dock system from the Town of Newbury Harbor Master, and it's down at the town landing at the Parker River. Let Mary do all the talking.
So, for the record, it's
Good
Mary
move, Chief.
Rimmer, Rimmer Environmental Consulting. Chief Riley's here, and also Dave Smith, who's the project engineer. This is an amendment to an order of conditions that was issued back in, originally issued back in 2011 for the repair of the town pier. And with the Permit Extension Act, we're still valid until August of this year. So what we're looking for, as after talking with Chief Riley, is that the original proposal was to repair the pier in place, and essentially, in order to comply with the existing regulations, that would have to be even higher than it is above grade right now. And there's a safety issue with people trying to launch and haul out boats there, because the pier is so high and the ramp is so steep down to the floats at certain tides, at low tide. And right. So there have been
numerous slips and falls.
Yeah.
The pier itself is in disrepair right now and desperately needs to be either replaced, which means elevated in a fixed position, or removed and something else put in.
So we're not proposing, the ramp itself is proposed to be built a new concrete ramp. That permitting is in place, and that is still proposed to occur. The float system beyond that is all still proposed to be the same as original. The only part that we're proposing to change right now is this fixed pier section at the top. And what we're proposing to do is eliminate that fixed pier underneath, which is mostly salt marsh now. Allow that salt marsh to regrow and put in a floating dock system that rests at low tide right on the concrete ring. So it's kind of a win-win. We get the pier out of the salt marsh. It's a safer situation, and there's enough room, the ramp is wide enough so that you can safely launch in that location, even with the 6-foot wide floating pier resting on one edge of the ramp there. So right now, there's some occasionally you get double, the clammers will have 2 trucks backing down at once. It's fairly rare that that happens. It's unlikely that that would be able to continue to happen with the floating system right here, but it's a pretty rare occurrence, and I think with the improvements to the ramp itself and the grade of the ramp, the concrete ramp, people will be able to come in and out of there much more quickly anyway. So we will be updating our Chapter 91 license as well. We've had initial consultation with the Chapter 91 folks. They don't have a problem with the change, so we expect that to go pretty quickly. And we're also requesting an extension to the order of conditions for 1 more year, just in case we're not able to get it done by August of this year.
Any questions from Mary?
Why wouldn't they go 3 years?
That's up to them. They could even come back and ask for another year extension if they wanted to, but, I mean, we can award it 3 years.
It's been, such a, let's see, 7 years now. We're asking for an 8th year. So you feel that's enough time to
Oh,
get it
absolutely.
done? Yeah.
I'd like to get it done at the end of this season.
Perfect, okay. If you can do it in 1 year, you can have it.
That's the plan.
Yep.
That's not an issue. Is the board familiar with this dock system? Do you know what they're talking about? It's the same one, if you've been up to the state ramp in Newbury, it's that same one that they use up there. So it's a post with your floats and a chain, and then some rollers, a buoy type roller around the chain. This thing just about goes up and down the chain. Any questions or concerns for the applicant? Are there any butters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? I'll go back to the board one more time.
Are you gonna, is this gonna be timed with the replacement of the ramp itself?
What we would prefer, what I'd love to do is get the floating dock system in as soon as possible, hopefully before the beginning of the real boating season. And there'll be time of year restrictions to remove and regrade the ramp itself, so we'll probably be looking to do that in the fall when we can get back down in the water. So the ramp would be at the same grade it is now and the same as it is now until, permitting in place, hopefully permitting will go fast so we can just rip up the existing tar, I don't know what you call it, you guys are the environmental people, rip that up, regrade, and then put the concrete down. And then it'll be all in place, everything will be in place for the beginning of the next boating season. That would be the ultimate plan.
Yeah.
You were saying that you're gonna pull it out in the marsh, the existing dock?
Well, they're gonna be cut at grade. That's the piers that are there supporting the fixed pier now, will just be cut at grade, and the rest of the pier disassembled.
So does that involve any work in that space? It's a different conversation, or is that conversation?
It would be handwork in that space, right? There wouldn't be any heavy equipment operating in there.
It's handwork in that space, but I think that the resource area that's under that space right now isn't functioning very well.
It's not really
Let's
very
put it that way,
well
yeah.
vegetated. There's an edge, there's an edge of, pretty 6-inch riprap probably, right at the edge of the pavement right now. And then majority underneath the existing pier is just mud flats. There's a few sprigs of alternate floors sticking up, but it's mostly just mud flat right now. So the idea is once that's taken out, that we'll be able to, after the work is done and that's all cleared out, that marsh grass will be able to recolonize that area.
Okay, any other
No.
concerns?
Well, sure, but it has nothing to do with the project, it's a driveway in the water, so it goes.
Yeah, well, that part's already been approved, so that's,
It is what it is.
yeah.
Yeah, it is what it is in that piece there. The blacktop's all coming out. I don't know if you've gone by the area and seen, have you been down there? You say you've seen the concrete that they're gonna use to replace it.
And
Okay.
GZA's done updated topo as well, so that'll help with the installation, since it has been so many years since the original survey was done. That'll help the placement of the ramp.
Anything else? Then I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. Need a glass of water, Brian?
No, I need to get over this, but that's, we're a
Okay.
chatty group apparently.
I move to approve this as presented.
All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's the extension. Let's look at that. Jim's hiding on me. She's think I was smart enough to make the fight. You gotta be careful. I'm pretty quick tonight. So I'll just sort of figure out a place where I can do that. Yeah, we'll do that. It's under the, still in place. We have a notice of intent for improvements to well PW5 from the Byfield Water District and Paul Colby at 35 Lockett Road.
And back again, representing Paul Colby. And this is a notice of intent. We do have a file number on this, if you haven't received it already. It's 50-1262. And this is to activate a well at the existing Larkin Road pump station location. This new well, this well exists, but the proposal is to activate it. There's a number of steps involved in that, including grouting, raising the casing on the well, doing some grading around the well, sloping it away from the wetland here, installing some chain link fence around, and installing a driveway. That here's the existing driveway here, out to the well site here. This is the pump station right here, the existing pump station. This is all occurring at the confluence of the Parker River, which is down here, and Zilla Brook coming this way. And so almost all of the site is within riverfront area, buffer zone. This green line here is the wetland associated with both of those rivers. So our buffer zones to those two systems overlap on the site. There are a number of utilities that need to be connected from the well site to the pump station, and some improvements and controls that are supposed to be installed in the pump station as well to make some upgrades there.
Area on to the north of the plan there, yeah. Is there a floodplain that goes through that?
Right here. Yep.
I
This
thought
is the
so. I
floodplain.
can't see it from here, but I
It doesn't
remember
really
it.
correspond very well to a topo on this plan, but it's there, and there's floodplain boundary along here as well. So
Okay,
in between, there's a little bit of a high ground. It's
So
kind of a peninsula that sticks out here.
that work that's on that upper tail, is there any fill that you're putting in there, in that floodplain? Any additional fill?
Apparently, there's a small amount of fill just right around the well site itself. Just a minimum amount. It looks like less than 1 foot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you're just crowning it up around there, shed the water away from the well?
Shed it,
bed.
yeah, exactly.
All right. I noticed that you're putting in a new system and you're going to inject something in there to sequester some of the minerals.
Yes, and I can't really speak to that
All right.
process at all.
Okay, maybe you can answer one question. I'm going to
Sure.
try it even though you said you can't answer it.
Yeah.
When they do that and they pull this, or this stuff binds together, is there a concentrate or a discharge or a backwash from this system? How do they get rid of those minerals once they get them together?
Yeah, those are, I was hoping Paul would be here tonight, but I can't answer those technical questions. But I can ask him to contact you about that.
You know, if it's like backwashing a pool filter or something
Right.
like that, I think the board needs to know that.
Mhm.
What else do they have for you?
What was the depth of the hole repairing?
The depth,
Yeah.
I don't know how deep this one goes. The grout that they want to put in is, goes down to 13 feet. So it's, that's just to seal it.
Yeah.
Um,
Is there any look at how this would affect base flow in either the road or the road?
One would think that with a 6-month pump test and those types of things that DEP has put them through, that will have been well.
Before or after swimming, I'm assuming your swimming rig's done.
I'm sorry.
No, right,
Yeah,
right,
yeah,
so,
okay.
yeah.
So
I don't know if they
you're
would
good
have
to move
already,
forward with?
if they would have done that when the well was installed.
Yeah.
They may have already done that.
I know they did so much pumping on that, they got nervous out here, and they asked them to turn it off at some point. They just pumped for like 6 months straight, so they did a lot of testing. So I can't really answer your question, but my guess is they've gone far beyond that, Ben.
Yeah.
And when was it installed?
Let's see, the 80s, I think it's in the notice of intent. Let me just double check. It's in there. Oh, okay, the pumping facility was constructed in 73 and updated in 85. Well pump for well O2G, that's this one in here. They just give some specs on the motors and the valves. Not relevant, but it does say 73 and updated in 85. So I assume this was put in at the same time. But if you do have specific questions, I can certainly have Paul contact you about that.
The hay bale detail, I think it was on this one, I've got a note here. The tail should be dug in, not,
Oh, okay.
I think
I wonder if
it just
it's-
shows the hay bales on top of the tail,
Okay,
but it should be dug in.
all right, I'll make note of that, and also I noticed this, the hay bales are going right across the wetland here.
That should dump, yeah, that should bump up. Mary, when do they want to get this done? What's the time frame on this?
I don't have that information either,
Okay.
unfortunately, so,
Well, since they're not here, I guess, and we don't have the answers to all our
Yes.
questions, I guess that's gonna be
right,
one that's not gonna get answered tonight.
Right.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the board? Maybe you want to answer them. Ben, is there anything,
Yeah, I
where we
think
have a month now,
yeah,
do you want,
yeah.
you have
Well,
a?
I would, I mean, maybe the information's out there already, I just need to go find it, but I'd be interested in affecting base flows.
Okay.
And on the same line of thought, it's not really part of this, but like how long has the well field been going, how much water have they pulled out, and what was the pre-existing system like prior to the well field being installed? So like a 1% shift now may not be a big deal, but compared to what it was, you know, that kind of contextual comparison might be nice.
Is this the one of the ones kind of project they put in because the others were, the ones closer to the Parker became
They
contaminated?
were under the influence of the Parker River.
Yeah.
Yes, and they're trying to do this so that in their high demands and heavy demands, they don't have to depend so much on area communities. Any other questions for next month or concerns? Are there any abutters here? Would anyone like to speak? Then it's my recommendation to the, Mary, do you have anything else to say?
nope,
Well, it's my recommendation to the board then that we grant the continuance with permission of the applicant to the May 15th meeting date.
Move. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mary.
thank you.
We have a request for determination of applicability to install a rooftop solar array from Lynn Duffin at 3 Johnson Road.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Nick Owen, Director of Operations for Boston Solar. And to install a 6.67 kW solar installation at 3 Johnson Road, Newbury.
Best word description I've ever seen. Most of them are 2 words. It's pretty simple and pretty straightforward. I really don't have any questions for the applicant on this one.
Any visuals?
Plans are included in
Yeah, there's some plans of that.
That's rooftop. You have a red dot on the map?
there. Yes, it does. There's another maps
On the page, I believe that are showing. Include a site plan in there as well. Any clearing?
I'm sorry,
Any clearing?
any clearing? As far as,
Trees and stuff?
oh, no touching the ground whatsoever.
Alright.
This is Plum Island. So it's the only reason they're here, is because it is the island.
Yeah, so like park in the driveway, climb up
Yep.
the ladder.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. To be fair, Doug, there are trees outside.
What's that?
There are trees out
I
there.
didn't mean, yeah, I realize that, but they don't usually get in the way of the solar panels, so. Good question.
So again, you're just setting up in the driveway here and all the works on that roof, is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Nothing around the pad?
No, there's some equipment we install in the house, but that's accessible just by walking, but no groundwork whatsoever.
Any other questions or concerns from the board? Are there any others?
Oh, just
I'm
like
sorry,
curiosity.
Brian, no, go
Yeah,
ahead,
yeah.
Brian.
Are you plugging into the grid, or is it just for the house?
No, it's plugging into the grid.
Right.
Interconnected.
So that's just curiosity, sorry.
Are there any butters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? I'll go back to the board one more time. Is the board satisfied? I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good night.
1 second for you. I think, was yours the date that you wanted to start around the 28th?
Yeah, we're gonna push that back.
Okay.
Within the 10-day limit, right?
Well, yeah, you're within the 10-day appeals period, but I wanted to tell you, with a negative determination, you can work within that 10-day appeals period.
Right.
It's the only process by which you can. So
Okay.
if time's of the essence, you can send a letter or an email to the board acknowledging that you're working within that time, and then the board can sign off on your permit if you have to.
Okay, great. Yeah, we were just planning on moving it out just to make things easier, but if that's the case, we'll definitely send a letter.
That's up to you.
Great.
It's your risk.
Perfect. All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Have a good night.
You, take care.
So Doug, you were saying the Plum Island thing, is it just like anything that happens on Plum Island, is it already?
Well, I want to talk about this again. I brought this subject up to the board, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, about what we pull in on Plum Island and what we don't. And we allow roofing and siding and windows and those things with a sign off, yet we bring in solar panels. And really, as far as I'm concerned, tearing a roof off on Plum Island has as much disturbance as about anything you can do. So, I mean, that's usually a lot of disturbance around the home. So it seems odd that we don't bring the roof in, yet we bring the solar panel in. So I think we ought to have a discussion about that, about what we really want to see and what we don't need to see.
Yeah, I mean, was that put in place originally because there's a ground mounted system when that whole habitation originally happened, now they're all on roofs, is that?
Well, you're on a roof, you know, and I've had this conversation with contractors before. Not to be a wise guy, you don't fly. So you show up, and you don't have to walk in the sand very long with too many guys before you've killed all the vegetation around the home. So just the activity of being there has some sort of impact on the vegetation in the resource area, to some extent. Most people walk around their homes. They have little paths around, like just, you know, they have to live there, so it's just something that happens. But again, we should discuss what we want to bring in and what we don't. We have a notice of intent to bury an 11,000-gallon water tank for drinking water and household use from Kathleen Peck and Jonathan Sox at 6 Old Raleigh Road.
Hello.
Hello, how are you folks?
I bought, just a little history, I bought 6 Old Raleigh Road from Ally Adams in 1996. And on the purchase and sale agreement, it said shallow well, 16 feet, will never run out of water. So the next summer, I ran out of water. And have just about every summer ever since. In 2008, Jonathan retired and moved to California, and he liked having running water. We decided to try to get water. We dug artesians twice and hit salt water. We filled half of that, one of them with, he blocked it up, Rollins blocked it up, and then tried fracking to try to get some groundwater, again salt water. So we never got any water. So I've been reduced to this, which is 10 5-gallon things in the back of my SUV every summer that I drive to the barn where I keep my horse and fill them, and then haul it up to second floor, 2 flush toilets. So
you've got great biceps.
absolutely, you got it, you got it. Jonathan has a bad back, so I've got the biceps. So anyway, across the street was the late Chip Haley, and he had this bad water treatment, and he spent 2 years researching a buried water tank, and about 1.5 years he put it in, and it's been very, very successful. So we are seeking to follow suit. I talked to Kathy Haley, and she said that the 11,000 is probably overkill. We may do 9,000 instead. because it just seemed like a lot. She never has bought more than 4,800 gallons, and it's brought in every 4 months. So we may get a small one, just because it's less impact. The tank is going to be buried on a hill that has an elevation of 30 feet. It's about 12 feet for the whole thing. We're on a 13-foot water floodplain, but this is going to be anchored by a concrete thing and then straps that hold it down. So if there's ever any groundwater that comes up, this is not going to go floating around like a torpedo.
You know how big the slab is and the concrete in width?
I have that information at home. I can get that for you.
You know what they look like? I think you can see them, Dan, on a picture. On one of the pictures that she gave me, it was a,
Yeah.
where did you show the concrete? I think there's a ballast that lays down beside one of them.
This is a picture of the tank being installed. I can get the specs from you.
No, I mean, I'm just sort of,
The only thing that bothers me about this picture is it would probably take 8 to 10 yards of concrete, literally, to hold this thing down. A 1,000-gallon propane tank takes 6.5 yards of concrete. So when this thing's not full of water and it's full of air, it could easily come popping up through the ground. Now, you said to me that you used your cell phone to get your elevation. When I look up your property on my map, and then I apply the floodplain to it, the floodplain data, it comes about halfway up that hillside. So there's probably a difference in the data set that they use on the cell phone for elevation and what they use for floodplain information.
Well, there's a big hill, and then where we are, because we hired a, when they came out with the new floodplain, we hired a surveyor to come and do an official survey. I can get that, because the very bottom of our property, the house is the low part. This was a garage, a sun porch between, and this is a hill. The top of this hill is about 30 feet, and that is by the cell phone, but this is where it would go. The house is much lower. You can stand and look down and see the house. The basement, he tested, this was an official, he got all the markers, spent a lot of time and money getting this survey done, and our basement is 12.5 feet above. So we missed that by 6 inches. So we're paying flood insurance. This is considerably higher than that. But, you know, the purpose of this, and I can get you those specs on how big it is.
well, it's presumably it's designed
To hold,
to hold the thing down.
that is the purpose of it.
Spec, what's the elevation on the other side of the driveway? So in this area here, it's a little bit
Okay,
further from the
so
salt marsh.
whatever, so the elevation of the lowest part of the basement is 12.5 feet. So what is the normal from the cellar to the ground level?
You were just saying that this was maybe I misunderstood. You're trying to say that the area you were citing it in on your property is
It's a
the
hill.
high point
It's
of
a
the
hill.
property.
It's a hill. John Hartnett put in the tank across the street. He's also the one that we would use to do this project, and he's recommended the hill because it would have the least amount of impact. It would just be slicing a little piece of the hill and putting it in. No mounding would be necessary.
To answer your question, depending on how high up on the foundation you fill, if you've got a 7.5-foot foundation, you've probably got 6 feet of fill on the outside of it. You normally want to leave 18 inches, 12 inches of a foundation. You don't want down too close. So it depends on how high your claddings are.
Okay.
You know,
Okay. All right, but what he said, I mean, you know, if you, the very bottom of that, and then it's what, 8 feet, probably 6 feet, 8, more than 6, I'm 6 feet tall, so probably 7 feet. So the elevation there on the other side of the driveway would be 12.5 plus 7 or 8, so it'd be about 20.
And you've got this distance here, plus the distance of the tank.
Right.
And this stuff here to take away from that elevation that you've got also. So
Right.
this, I assume this is 4 feet in the ground?
I think they said 3.
3 feet in the ground? And then how big's the tank?
I can get you the exact specs, if you
Okay.
have that.
All right. Well, I don't wanna beat this to death. The
Okay.
only thing we wanna be sure of is it doesn't come popping up through your yard when the marsh floods, that's all. If we're getting a little too technical here, maybe we are, but if you can show me that, if you have the engineering that shows that, before we sign off on the
Right.
permit, you wanna supply
Right.
that to the board, that would
Let
be
me,
great.
let me get that, I can get that information from the water tank, manufacturer.
And I think conceptually, I don't have a problem with this, I just wanna make sure that from a technical standpoint, it's gonna work for you.
And then just aesthetically, I suppose, is the answer. You're not, so there's no above ground options
Nothing.
there either, because it would just look awful kind of
It
thing.
would look hideous.
Right, okay.
And I'd have to take down my
You got a
tree.
scale right here. So, get an idea, what's the scale?
Without some.
You said 2 feet of ground, it would be flush. So it's not gonna take
It'll be
too
flush,
long.
it'll be, you won't even know it's there, because it is buried 3 feet. You know, there's a hill, it's probably, 15 feet
Yeah.
high. So he's just gonna slice it and drop it in there.
It's pretty close to 7 feet to the bottom.
So if I can ask a question?
Sure.
I see on this plan here, salt marsh is here, and the tank is here. Is that a very steep slope or?
Yes, very steep, yeah,
uh,
it comes way down.
Is the salt marsh continuing along here?
The salt marsh, this is sort of the elevation of the hill right here.
Yeah.
And then, so this is flat and a little bit higher than the salt marsh. And this goes, the hill goes right up. Like that.
Can you walk down?
She's got a small cliff on her property, more or less.
Can you walk down
You can, if you're
Not
careful.
under 74, no.
All right.
He has
Okay, so that answers the question, some can.
Some people can, I can, but you would be stupid to do it, you know, I mean, you more like come around this way and then walk over it. It's easier.
It's sort of hard to picture the whole thing where you're very close to the salt marsh.
Mhm.
There's a huge hill.
It is, this is a mound, yeah, this is a mound.
And, you know, given that steep slope, you kind of wonder, you know, if you start disturbing that steep slope, what's going to happen?
Well, I don't know whether that hill was natural or whether it was piled up there when they built the house and they used the what was for excavation there to,
You guys have already seen if there's, make sure there's no ledge underneath that to,
pardon?
what's the substrate on the hill? Like, so how far, how much soil do you have, how much rock?
I would have thought it would be pretty ledgy.
If you have, yeah, if you have.
My
that
guess
kind
is
of
it's
top
pretty
ground.
ledgy. There is a ledge, on one side.
Yeah. So again, I think that where I think everybody's questions are going, and I obviously in my mind are, why not put it on the part of the property that's farther from the salt marsh?
Because there is not, there's no area.
It's not much farther, but if you put it on the other side of your driveway.
Well, if you put it here.
It's in our front yard.
Yeah, well,
And
plus it's also,
there's also the septic
Oh,
system.
oh, okay.
Septic-
Okay, well, that's
septic-
not marked, is that
Yeah.
marked there?
Yeah.
Is that-
Okay,
sorry.
the septic and leaching is here.
Gotcha.
The existing
Oh, that's
well is
great.
here.
Oh,
Um,
that's marsh right there.
So this was sort of this was originally gonna be a separate parcel, but it didn't perk. So it just goes along with our house.
Well, that answers that question, anyway, why it's over there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is all the septic and leaching field that goes all the way out to here.
that makes sense.
The existing well is here,
Was this house built?
1978.
There's where it is.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
But I can get you the exact specs as
Okay.
far as the length and width and all of that.
for the 9,000.
Yeah, for the 9,000.
I'm more concerned with the ballast and, the water table, and is this thing gonna stay in it, so.
Yeah, well, that's what it's designed to do, is it's designed to hold us down.
I think what these guys are getting at too is you're gonna be awful close to that hillside. Did the orientation of that, was that laid out, or did you just lay that in there and go, well, maybe it'll go in this direction, and can that,
Yeah, yeah,
can that
it
pivot?
would
So,
completely be,
okay,
completely
so
be-
that could go more of a north-south than an east-west, and maybe
absolutely.
pull it away from the edge of that bank a little bit.
Yeah, I mean,
Sure.
I agree with that. If you could, I don't know, again, you know how
Sure.
the hill's configured, but if it's here and you're separating yourself.
Yeah,
from the
I was
sidewalk.
just thinking of the ease of filling it, but it certainly could go up here. You know, it could go rather than that way, I just drew it in, but it can certainly go this way, it would be however.
That would improve your setbacks a little bit.
Okay,
And, you know, I think generally speaking, when you're doing that, it's gonna be better from protection of the salt marsh. Be kind of on the slope of the hill,
Mhm.
running away from the salt
sure,
marsh.
sure,
a little bit.
sure, he could put it up here, it would be a different set of trees would come down, so I don't know if you wanna come and look at the property and say what you want, because originally John Hartman came over and he said, take down this tree and this tree, and, you know, he was thinking in this area, somewhere in this
He
area.
might be able to take down only this tree and then pivot at 90.
Do you know what the trees are?
Pardon?
Do you know what the trees are?
One is a big maple, a big pine, and one is a medium-sized oak.
Just as in a manner of speaking, you'd be better off taking the pine down. than the oak.
They got the pine coming down and they have deciduous trees
Yeah.
that are not coming down.
The pine would definitely come down, but you're right, we could swing it the other way, and it could go along so that it's facing this way.
It might, yeah, you might be able to save that if you can stay out of the drip line.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah. Do you want to write that in that direction and,
Sure.
and initial it?
Mhm.
It's all right.
I never knew about the shallow well when I bought half the house.
Oh, I complained for years.
Well, how do you complain? You know, a physique like that, I mean, it saves you the trip to the gym, I mean.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But I have to see, when I go work out, that's where I take almost 95% of my showers for the last 2 years. So I actually get me into the gym.
Is the board ready to move forward with this?
Yeah.
Comfortable enough to move forward with this? Are there any butters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? Back to the board one more time. If you're ready to go, I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion. Move we approve. All those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Now, only contingent upon you getting me the engineer's report on
Yep.
the tank and the ballast and that.
It would be, it's the specs from the manufacturer.
That's fine. As long, I'll be able to read those, so that's fine.
Do you need the engineering specs for the elevation, that sort of thing of the house, when you did the?
As long as the tank is ballasted, I don't care if it sits in the water. It really doesn't matter
Okay.
to us if
Okay.
it's subject to groundwater.
Okay.
The only thing it's gonna do to you is make a one heck of a mess out of your yard if it's
Right.
not ballasted
Right,
properly,
right,
and you
right,
get that
exactly.
flood water.
Right, right. Well, we have something to float on, then, you know.
You would have something to save you, yes. You
Very expensive float.
Yeah, it would be.
So, yeah, we will get you that information and turn it sideways, and,
Yeah, because we could add it, you know, in the condition, something about moving it as far away from salt marsh as practical.
I can condition.
the one across the street, John Hartman said was not close enough to the salt marsh to approach you guys, so, they did it without needing a permit.
John will do it right now.
I'm using, we're gonna use all the people that did the one across the street to get to, because they did a great job. So,
Sir?
Okay.
Yep.
that's it.
We are on site.
But do we we get a copy of that? at some
We
point?
haven't.
Yeah, you will get what you will get is you will get an order of conditions. We have to go back into town hall now and prepare that order, so I do a portion of it, goes to Jen's desk, she does a portion of it. She'll put it in an envelope, call you when it's ready, and on that envelope will be the day that the 10-day appeals period clears.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you. Jim, do you need the rest of the paperwork, please?
Yes, please. For the solar on the island. I think that while she's looking for that, we'll move on to the next one.
This is the picture. This is the one to the DEP. These are all of these. One person came back. This is ours, in case you need a copy of it. This is the permit thing. You said I cannot do the permits, they have to do it, but that's what I'm doing. Okay, great, thanks.
We have a request for a determination of applicability to install a rooftop solar array from Lynn Maven at 21 Basin Front. Good evening, how are you?
Good. Sam Pillsbury, Operations Specialist for Vision Energy. And we're looking to install a 5.5 kilowatt PV array on the south facing roof on 21 Basin Front Drive.
These pictures of this one, the pictures came off of that one.
No trees.
No, perfect solar access.
Yeah, it's turf lawn, it's, this is about as easy as this one as it gets.
So you're saying the area we might ladder up there is
Right in the front, we're gonna go right up the gable end.
turf lawn?
Yep.
Going up the gate?
Just, we're gonna try to reduce any traffic anywhere outside of the compacted paths. So just gonna set up one ladder on the meter side to get our conduit up into the attic space, and then everything else is on the roof.
Any questions or concerns for the applicant? Are there any abutters here? Would anyone like to speak on this project? I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You might have heard me say to the other, guy that was in here before you, 10-day appeals period starts the day after the postmark. It doesn't start tonight, it starts the day after the postmark that the order is in, so.
Understood.
What we usually do is we'll send DEPs off to them, that's the date we'll use to put on the envelope. We'll keep you the determination right in town hall.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, have a good night. Thank you. You're welcome, take care. We have a request for determination of applicability to replace and maintain a bog bridge and to cut brush from and maintain a trail corridor from historic New England at 5 Littles Lane, 24 Plum Island Turnpike.
I can't represent it, so I don't feel comfortable. I'm recused. Mike's not.
When I'm asking questions.
This is something new.
Okay.
Yeah, no, this is a brand new filing.
Okay, no, I saw the discussion with the agreements.
Dan did talk about it, yes.
Yeah,
Dan did
that's-
bring it
this is-
before,
this is-
yes,
okay,
yes.
yeah, very, yeah.
That's all right, come on, all we need is a warm body, come on up and we'll get you through this, don't worry.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, you're the hero, so don't worry about it.
That's right.
All right.
Doing this as a side job for you?
Yeah, apparently at the moment.
Yeah, this is not a greenbelt thing?
It's not a greenbelt
All
thing.
right,
All
so
right.
you're gonna give us this, please, we'll take that.
I don't know what it says. I'll remember that.
So you've got an existing bog bridge there.
Yep, it looks like it's.
That has fallen into extreme disrepair. I think I saw a drawing in there, there's gonna be replacement bog bridge, almost the same, although it looks like you're gonna improve your distance to the ground a little bit and make that a little better. Other than that, it looks like almost a direct replacement to me.
Doug,
It
but
looks
that
like-
mean higher?
I'm sorry, I mean higher, yeah, you're gonna improve the distance between the two, the ground and the bottom of your bog bridge. The only thing I noticed on this is that on this picture right here, on these series of pictures, it looks like bicyclists and others traverse beside this bridge in order to get through there. And it looks like, sorry, and it looks like over time, what's happening is you kind of get a channel in here that's starting to collect water. And maybe that's just a low point, I can't really tell, but it looks almost like the track. It's a very narrow track.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that.
Where is that?
Spencer.
Spencer Pierce in between Audubon and Little's Lane.
Is it the path to the airport?
Yes, exactly, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I've been in there, and you're right, it is running,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is there any plan to address that running? Do you know of?
I don't,
Okay.
but I'm hoping that by reconfiguring the planks in this direction, bikers won't feel
Go
they have
over
to go
that?
off onto the
They'll
edge.
go on this?
Yep.
Will there be?
This is kind of terrible to ride on, so hopefully, reversing it to that direction, it'll eliminate the side trail traffic.
That was a good answer.
Thank you.
What's the new elevation gonna be, Doug?
Oh, it looks like anywhere from 6 inches to 8 inches off the ground, because it looks like they've got a 6x6 bunk down there, and then a 2x here and there. Well, there's a double 6x6, so
Yeah.
maybe as much as a foot in some areas, and as little as 6 to 2 or 3 inches in others.
So, just, filling out the stupid question and things, it might be obvious, we wanna keep it in the same spot.
Yes.
Speaking as a citizen, yes, it would go, it's basically just replacing what's there. What's there is very low to the ground. If you look at in the other booklet there, there's this previous permitting and plan.
Just as, yeah, if you moved it and rearranged the whole thing a little bit, you might end up with a nicer outcome in the end, rather than, Band-Aids, so to speak. But
It's through an impacted area.
Yeah.
You've already impacted this area, why?
Well, I just wanted to cover the obvious and make sure that, it's staying where it is and it's too much bother to move on, but, when I went through there, the impression I got of the place was it was so shrubby and overgrown, that of a project out of it, but I'm going way off.
No, that's what, that was written in here. I mean, there is written in here that they want to do some brush cutting and to cut that path back some, 8 feet in some areas and as much as 13 in others. And speaking as a citizen, that's what I was going to ask, is what's the reason for that beside that? If you've got these planks now that are running.
The problem is where the boardwalk is, the growth, it's very hard to maintain. It's proven very hard for historic New England to maintain. Not on the side that's the tractor road, the cart road that's always been there, but the opposite side, it just keeps growing over. So I think they'd like to cut back enough so that they can maintain with whatever means, brush cutter, like a 2-foot width beyond the.
I got you. So they've got some soft growth in there and not these tree branches sticking through into the pathway. Okay, all right. Are there any other questions for the applicant or concerns?
All my questions are, entirely, yeah.
Okay, I get you. Are there any abutters here? Would anyone like to speak on this? I will close the public hearing and entertain a motion. Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll have a second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you for stepping up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just from a trail building perspective, it's one thing, but if you're dealing with an old path and you're maintaining the old path, that's a whole other thing. Like compaction and water running and all that other stuff that you could just say, all right, let's move up, let that. But if that's not an issue, then.
I think if you can just, I think the fact that use of forces. Good evening. How are you all? Ian?
Yes. Oh, thank you.
You're welcome. These folks are not in the audience, so we'll take care of these folks now, and we'll take care of this other business once we get through. We have some updates regarding 131, 133, 151 Scotland Road, the Newbury Golf Center. We had a little issue out there the other day. They got a little bit outside their orders of conditions and did a little work outside their permitted work zone. So they're here tonight to bring us up to speed on that and discuss that with us. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm Ann Martin with LEC Environmental. I'm going to walk you a little bit through just the chronology. I'm very new to this project, but there was some work that occurred by the logger and tree cutter that was beyond the limit of work. And the building inspector issued a cease and desist on April 4th, which was a Wednesday. Doug issued a cease and desist on April 5th, which was a Thursday. I believe I received the call from Rick Waite from Meridian, who's on vacation, so he's not here, on that Wednesday. So we conducted a site visit on Friday, April 5th in the morning. So that was the first time that I had an opportunity to see the site or visit the site. And then there was a site visit this past, it's today, Wednesday, a week from today, on April 11th, basically with town staff. Margaret Taylor was there, building inspector, of us. This is Mike Capchetti from Meridian. He's kind of standing in for, everybody's on vacation. This is Adam, he's standing in for Mike Rosen, who's a regular attorney. Of course, this is a client, Eric Sorensen. So we had a site visit, we walked the area, had a chance to look at what the limit of tree clearing was. Erosion controls had started to go in, starting probably on the 5th, because when I was there on the 6th, they were in the process of installing them. And so that gave Doug an opportunity to see them. We talked about some plan preparation, and Meridian very promptly, as soon as the cease and desist went out with their survey crew, and then let's see which, we put together a couple plans that I'm hoping might help tell the story a bit. You can see this. So this is the existing conditions plan. It has the existing conditions data on it from the permit process. And this pink line is the limit of work that was approved by the Conservation Commission. So what Meridian did was send their survey crew out to survey any places, the limit of work, where it exceeded the limit of work, the actual work, which is this red dashed line, and it's the areas that are shaded in gray all along here. And then they also survey located any tree stumps that remain in place. And we'll talk a little bit about the fact that not all the tree stumps were in place. We had a draft plan of that with us, that I think you ended up with a copy of.
We did.
From our sidewalk. It was very like fresh, hot off the press, but was an ability to kind of demonstrate how quickly we were responding to this and how seriously we were taking it. When we walked it, we discovered there was one little place right here where it went beyond the limit of work that we missed the first time around. We walked the entire limit of work, confirmed everything, looked at the stumps that were there. The reason why we overlaid this, or I asked them to overlay this over the existing conditions plan, is that there are a number of places where you see gaps where there are no trees. And so I asked them to overlay it to the extent that there were locations where they had already surveyed trees, because in some areas, stumping had occurred. So if the stump had already been taken out, there's no way for us to know if there was a tree. So anywhere you see there are round circles on here, double round circles, those are stumps that remained in place that we saw in the field that are still there today. And it has the size of the diameter of the tree at the stump, that's not DBH. And we're hoping to correlate what would really be DBH to the DBH of some of the other trees. And there's overlap in here where we can see correlations. But down in through here where they had already surveyed trees, we were able to pick up that there were only a few trees that were actually cut beyond the limit of work here because we had the prior survey. And that also accounts for places where there are just gaps in here where there aren't trees, and you'll see that on this other plan in a minute. One of the things that we talked about at the site visit was when we moved towards preparing a mitigation plan, how would we go about estimating the number of trees that were in the footprint of areas where it's hard for me to believe that there weren't trees in this broad area right here. We talked in the field about a couple methods, but during the planning board process, for them to estimate how many trees would actually be cut across the whole site, Meridian had already done this two-step process where they went out, surveyed an acre of land, estimated the number of trees in certain caliber in it, and applied that math to be able to tell the planning board how many trees would be removed during the course of the project in their permit process. So it seems to me, I'm just gonna apply that same standard. They use the standard, unless someone feels it's not an appropriate standard, but it's a standard the planning board used to estimate the number of trees during the permit process. So I was gonna take that and apply that to be able to estimate the number of trees in some of these areas where we feel like there might be a gap. And in the end, it's an estimate. We're gonna be estimating where we don't know what is within the footprint.
Do you know, did they do just the caliper and the DBH, or did they have the species as well?
They had, the only differentiation on the existing survey was whether it was deciduous or evergreen. The package of materials that you might have seen Doug hand to me, there was an ANRAD application for the wetland boundary on this site a number of years ago. And Mark West from West Environmental did that work, so I asked him for a copy of the file. He indicated that there are photographs in there, so I'm gonna look at some of the photographs. I'm gonna look at some of the materials as best to figure out what some of the vegetation was. So when we get into a restoration, particularly in the buffer zone or the wetlands where that ANRAD is focused, there are some plants that I saw out there that I know what was there, but any existing data that I can gather to help me do a better job, I'm going to go for that. The other thing that we are doing is we've retained the assistance of Neil McCarthy. He's a forester arborist who has done projects like this on other projects that some of our project team are with, and he is going to assist us from kind of a forestry perspective on how to go about doing the restoration. He's going to meet me at the site. We're going to look at some of the stumps that are in place. We'll probably have a discussion about, do we leave those there to allow suckers to come up and provide regrowth? Do we pull them out? So he is going to join our team and offset and help me put together a restoration plan. So this board shows the same information without kind of all of the existing condition detail, but shows in kind of it has the buffer zone. You can see the buffer zone to this wetland. The buffer zone, when you approved this, there was an offset from the wetland that got altered. So this is all area that needs to be restored. Just kind of giving you a picture window of what's in your jurisdiction, what's within the buffer zone, what occurred in a wetland, what didn't. So this area here, this was a non-jurisdictional isolated wetland that was altered, and it was supposed to stay, so that will be restored. And then there's a couple little clips of buffer zone extending from this wetland over here, and there's a tiny little bit of buffer zone in this stream that comes up into here. That's obviously not to say that we won't be dealing with the planning board in relationship to these other upland areas, but I thought you'd probably kind of want to know where some of those lines are, where some of those differentiations are on the plan. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about is stabilization of portions of the site. And I had mentioned this to Doug a little bit, is I very quickly, this is basically the approved plan that has some changes to seeding mixture. A lot of the front portion of the site, except for right here, and I realized when I looked at this that it actually probably extends more up into here. A lot of this has not really been disturbed that much. Would you?
I would agree. There's still turf left.
There's still turf left there, or there weren't a whole lot of trees removed through this section, except for right through here. There's some areas that have been torn up a little bit, but even in through here, it's fairly in place. But back here is where a lot of work has occurred. There are some places where we had difficulty installing erosion controls because you just couldn't get in there. There were rocks, there were tree stumps that were left. It was really torn up. Along here, there are some boulders that are down in the area along here. And right now, we had talked in the field that they had done the best they could at installing some straw wattles, but Doug pointed out, these aren't really working that well. And part of it's because that material really needs to be pulled out of there before we can reestablish this line. It's a lot of rock, so if anything came down off the slope right now, it would probably accumulate in the rock. But up in here and up in this area and through here, it's pretty torn up. So one of the things that we wanted to discuss with you is the ability, and I know that you wanted to talk about how you proceed forward under enforcement. was the ability that under the design, there were 4 depressions in this back area that were supposed to receive runoff of stormwater. Would be to be able to create those depressions and perform some of this grading, pull this rock back so that we could see and stabilize this area. They did do a inspection today. I did look at some photographs. Did you go to the site?
I didn't dare. I thought of it all day Monday.
You would probably would have gotten in mud. I saw some photographs. I don't think they've written the report yet. It fared a little better than I thought it would. I'm not sure how much rain you've got here. The rainfall amounts varied widely, probably across, you know, this region anywhere from 1.5 inches to something in places reporting 2.5 inches. But there are places where I think some silt got through into here. There are some puddles where the water is puddling, but there is a concern about how we can quickly get this part of the site stabilized so it's not contributing and causing continued impacts. This part, so this kind of showed, this was is the seed mix that was proposed for these 2 areas. Down here, this is kind of like a rye, just to like throw something to stabilize this, just kind of like the way it is, because, and it would be as it was needed. Eventually, it would be good to get some basins in here to take any of this kind of water, and I would really like to put a little temporary basin right at the base of this slope. I don't know if you remember standing there, it's pretty steep. There are some erosion controls down here, but it would be nice to put a temporary basin there.
Well, you already have a disturbance down there too, outside your limits of work.
Right, so it would be nice to get a temporary basin or something in there so that water could accumulate as it comes down that slope. It settled before it went somewhere else. That's the nuts and bolts. I'll answer any questions to the extent that I can. Any feedback that you can give us moving forward. I kind of outlined what we would do for the mitigation, but if you have any particular thoughts or any things you want to share, we would love to.
Have you started any definitive plans for those 4 areas that you want to create, or are you sort of waiting for the board to?
These right here?
Yes.
Well, we're under a cease and desist, so
well, I understand that, but,
right.
but moving forward in the way that you want to move forward could be a little difficult to get some actual physical work done prior to settling a lot of this.
Right.
So where we had, you know, a flood on Monday, and we're talking about some minor erosion, that the site did actually better than anticipated, why would we not want to use a ryegrass, something quick, and just spray this site and then not have to worry about getting 3 cease and desist dismantled so that you can start to accomplish this. I think that might be tough.
And that is, and I think part of it is what constitutes, I don't know any other word to use, but what will constitute work and what will constitute activities on the site to make sure that sediment's not moving around. And to the extent that there are things that we could do out here to stabilize the site, even if it included some grading and some things to make sure that water is ponding as it should be, or we're not sending more sediment down into this wetland system and down here.
Maybe some multiple layers of siltation fencing that would slow the water down on the hillsides and still not put a D8 on the site. You know, I think that could be difficult to get out of the board at this moment.
Yeah. Okay, and I understand that.
But certainly, yeah, I mean, I'm all for you trying to mitigate your damage, absolutely. I think that's important, as a matter of fact. We're not here to create more problems than we already have.
I haven't walked the site yet, but I'm just driving by, it looks like everything got de-aided and clear cut. So does that wetland that we talk a lot about those wetlands? The
small wetland that's down in front, that was adjacent to the home, little triangular, up a little bit in, right up in there. That was fairly well taken care of. It had some tracks through it, so someone drove through it before they put the silt fence.
It has tracks through it like that, but
that's an absolute minor fix. One of the bigger injuries was to the non-jurisdictional wetland. It's non-jurisdictional, they could have filled it if they chose to, so that's not a serious injury.
I remember most discussing the buffer around that piece, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got the bigger wetland up to the upper right there, that is jurisdictional, that has some serious damage to it. It was driven through, it was nothing but a mud puddle, well,
So all of it.
I shouldn't say that.
removed, or-
Really, the water was relatively clear when we were out there. It's amazing how good it actually stayed. They've got the wattle up there now, so they're protecting it. The other side of that is where we were talking about, where they put down, there's a wall of debris about this high. So I agree with Ann that even though the straw wattle isn't very effective, the debris itself is not letting much through
I
there
guess,
at this
what are
point.
the site conditions relative to what it looked like prior to work?
Oh, it looks like you mortared it for 5 or 6
So,
hours.
yeah, so
It's a war zone, it's a mess.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I was trying to ask.
Yes.
That's what it looked like from the road.
Yeah,
So that's-
it's quite dug up. They had grubbed a lot of it, but they hadn't smoothed it over yet, and there's some stumps that aren't, there's some that
So it was
aren't.
a flag wetland that they just ran right through it, cut everything out?
They cut the flags and threw them on the ground.
Okay. So what are the options for mediation or something like that?
I think that our mediation is, this is just my opinion, is somewhat more cut and dry than some of the other issues they have. Our mitigation is you get into that wetland and you restore it the way it was. That's possible to do. Some of the other injuries, like your sight lines and things like that with large trees, large growth trees, that's going to be another issue, but it's not so much our issue. I think our issue, again, is a little more cut and dry than the buffer issues.
Right. It does look like there were trees that, if I can see this far, if I together, there were trees within that buffer.
Oh, definitely, there was a 25-foot no-cut that they had agreed to honor around
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
the one at the top right-hand side
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So those would be replaced with trees in kind, so.
As much in kind as we can get with the types of, and again, those pictures that I gave Ann may help her with that, because they shot them down those wetlands, so.
But of relatively similar maturity as well.
Well, I'm gonna leave that up to them and their forester to discuss that maturity, because there was some discussion centered around the fact that you can put in a, I'm gonna make these dimensions up, you could put in a 6-inch caliber tree. And it might not do as well as a 4-inch in the same place over a certain given time. And so I think that we need some information from the forester and from plant people to answer those questions.
Yeah, we will give you an explanation. My goal is to, any decision that I make, that I have a good explanation for you for why I made that decision. So that I'm not just making random decisions that aren't based in something logical. One of the things, there was activity in here, but we had talked about this a little bit at the site visit. One of the nice things is that in both of these wetlands, the seed bank is still there. And even some of the brush that was cut, the rootstock is probably there from some of the understory. That does not mean that we would not include some shrub plantings in here as well as trees, but it does mean we saw some of it coming up before. Skunk cabbage is already starting to come up. Any of the herbaceous layer, because there was no stripping of topsoil or anything in either of these wetlands, that's all gonna come back up. We need to do a little bit of smoothing because there's some ruts through some of it, but that seed bank is present.
When would you suggest the right time to go in and work on that jurisdictional wetland would be?
Oh, I wanna do it like,
You want to do it yesterday?
I would like to do it yes.
Okay.
The sooner the better, I think.
I would agree with that. It's one of the
There's no
first things.
reason to wait.
Moving 4 or 5 lots there, any deals?
You mean the homeowners, the other properties? Yeah, and that was sort of what I was alluding to before, that our fix is not quite as subjective as the others. You have a bordering vegetated wetland, it needs to function the way it was, like Ann says, a lot of the rootstock's still there. If left to its own, you smooth the roots over, you might not know it in a year or two. The greatest injury is going to be from that buffer zone with those mature trees that you just can't recreate. And that's going to be more of a planning board, board of selectmen issue, more than it is going to be a Concom issue.
Yeah, that will be addressed. I just didn't get into that here because I knew that I felt like Doug didn't want me to go there. I know you don't like it when people mix.
Well, it's a different,
Outside,
it's hard to separate. In this case, it was all one action, but the different boards have different priorities.
And when we put together a plan, I won't be coming back and showing you one plan that only shows this, and the planning board something that only shows this. We'll come back with a comprehensive plan to both of you. I just was really focusing in and trying to give you an idea of this is what happened within the areas that are jurisdictional to you. This is the direction we're going in. These are what are some of our concerns that are within your arena.
So if we enforced upon you to come in with either a notice of intent, amended notice, whatever process your side decides to move forward with, to restore those areas, that wetland, and those areas around that wetland, get back to compliance, and once that work is done, we move on into the bigger picture? So that once we're back
That wouldn't be my preferred path,
so that once we're back into
exactly, but,
compliance, we move.
So you were saying that, when you say get back into compliance, are you saying that we would come and present a plan to you that you would approve? And then once all the plants were installed, then work elsewhere on the site could occur?
Well, once the injury is repaired, and we're well on the way to repairing that injury and getting that wetland back to functioning like it should, then the rest of the work could continue. But that would be the first thing that you would concentrate on is,
Right.
is repairing those injuries.
Right.
Does that makes sense to me?
It makes sense to me. I still have some concerns about coming in and restoring this area without doing some repair or some work in here.
Maybe that would be part of, instead.
Because I want to make sure that if we go and repair this, that we're not having drainage, we're not having anything spilling back in, or with, so, yes.
You think you could finesse something that would?
Yes, I can finesse something that would, but I'm just being honest with you about concerns that I
Listen, I
see
understand
with-
you have a great big dirt watershed now, and you've got a
Yeah.
little wetland at the bottom of it
And I
that
don't
you're gonna
want-
restore and try and protect.
And I don't want the dirt going there because
I
I'm
get that.
spending all my time restoring and I'm not doing, so yes.
And maybe some multiple layers of silt control
Yep.
and some certain erosion
Mhm.
blankets in heavy places, and those
Right.
kind of things could move that along. Okay.
Okay, so when you guys did the sidewalk, what was it like for invasives?
There was no, it was very hard to tell because the area that she talked about that was turf because obviously it was mowed meadow, it was field long before. The rest of the areas that we're talking about, there was nothing there. There were 20-inch trees gone, there were no invasives left.
Just because, with an impact like that, you're just creating a space.
It actually opens a scar in the earth for them to, and maybe that would be something that we could write into the order moving forward, that there would be some type of invasives monitoring and make sure that something doesn't take a foothold.
Yeah, because no matter how much work she does, if, you let something grow in, it all goes
Absolutely.
them off.
So were there invasives
I don't know.
on the site?
Yeah, I thought that's what you were referencing, is a lot of the sidewalks last summer. Were there invasives then?
Not that I recall. I mean, I don't
Okay.
recall having an invasives problem on the site, but
What about, do you have any sense of off-site, if up the road a little bit, there was a big patch of, X, Y, or Z, or?
there's some Japanese knotweed across the street, not very far from it.
I've got a
There's
personal thing
frags.
with that, yeah.
Yeah, there's frags all along the road, so.
That's your personal favorite?
Favorite.
So yes, there are some in close proximity.
What is the current, access to the site like, is it reasonable access, or is it that all just kind of?
It's reasonable access, because what they did is they came in the original driveway for maybe the first 100 feet or so, and then they put in, looks like maybe a 6-inch, 3-inch, 4-inch minus roadway in there to clean their tires. So the access from the existing driveway is pretty clean and clear at this point.
Yeah, can zip in.
So it's not, start fixing this stuff, and if the access is not adequate, then there's just gonna be more problems.
Yeah, no, they did install their construction entrance. It may need a little work. They put a little stone down the bottom that was a little too small. So then they put something up the hill a little further, and it's quite live, so it's doing a decent job at this point, I believe.
So what's the schedule on coming up with the plan?
Well, what I did is I started I'd started an enforcement order when I was at the office earlier, just for discussion points. Not that I felt as though this is the language that would get pulled over the finish line. But what I've got is, I've got the violation type, and the type of activity was work performed violates conditions of and exceeds the authority of the order issued on such and such a date with a final plan with a revision date. And then I went on to the findings. The order shall immediately cease and desist. A restoration plan shall be filed with the issuing authority on or before. I left the date blank because that's really in their court. For the following: to repair by returning to their original condition all resource area or buffer zone alterations not permitted under the order of conditions issued 1/23/18. And then I put to complete the attached notice of intent, which I did not attach a notice of intent, I know they have them, with the issuing authority on or before, and I put 5/15/2018, which is just the next regularly scheduled meeting date. My guess is that you'd have it here sometime earlier than that or before that. Or is that too little time, Ann? That's about a month.
That is not too little time.
Okay. So if I leave that at 5/15/2018, you're certainly not going to violate it. You'll be in here well before that.
So 5/15/18.
And that date's
is the
flexible.
date of the public hearing?
No, that is the NOI shall be filed with the issuing authority on or before that date. And it would be nice if it was at least 7 or 8 days before that, so we can get, 10 days before that at least, which would be,
What would be the date of a public hearing?
well, the 15th would be the date of the public hearing, so
Oh,
let me
okay.
get you this.
I was kind of going, thinking this is a serious enough deal that we could have a meeting earlier.
We could have an earlier meeting if we had to, exactly.
Okay.
You'd need to be submitted on or before the 3rd, so that we could get your legal ad to you on and in the paper on or before the 8th for the meeting on the 15th. And those are drop dead dates, you don't have to wait for those dates.
I'm laughing because I have a huge notice of intent hearing elsewhere that same night. But I might be able to finagle 2 places at once if I go first in one and last in the other, or something along those lines.
Is this something where this would be done prior to this date, and we'd have a meeting prior to that time, while we've got everybody here right now?
I think what I'm partially concerned about is the timeframes that are required for submittal to advertise in the paper, because you're talking about either amending the original permit or filing a notice of intent versus handling it straight under an enforcement matter.
Yes.
If you handle it as a straight enforcement matter, it doesn't have to be advertised in the newspaper.
I understand that. We discussed that, so.
Right.
For the board, we discussed that on site as taking it strictly under enforcement, which means we order them to do that work, that takes the public right out of the process, and they go do that work. We're just ordering it to be done into compliance. I felt as though this was a high-profile site, that people were watching this, and I didn't feel comfortable taking the public out of the process. So that's why I wrote this, the enforcement, to have them file a notice of intent, bring a notice of intent forward. So that was my reason behind that, but that's up for discussion. I'm not the king here, I'm just the chair, so we can have that discussion if you want.
No, that's good.
What's the square footage or, mileage or whatever on the jurisdictional space that we're working with here?
Do you know what the square footage is, Ann, on the disrupted,
I've just got to decipher, that's what it was on. 7,300 square feet.
Okay, and then
So this area right here is 7,300?
correct?
Okay.
And then the watershed, if you will, that you're worrying about, is that double, triple, half, you know, in terms of?
Do you mean the watershed that is contributing in this direction? Or, okay,
I believe it was 17 acres total being cleared, so I mean, just taking a stab in the dark over there, you're looking at, I mean, I know it's coming from about having
3
5 full.
3 acres?
Yeah,
So
3 to
maybe
4
a better way
acres.
to ask the question is, there's no micro watershed that is in, you know, just within the lines on that plan. The water contributing to that impacted space comes in from outside.
No, there is I'm sorry, there is almost a berm area around the top part of the site that contributes watershed going to for the hunting.
Fish and wildlife.
Thank you.
Yes.
So it's mainly this site that contributes to it, that's all disturbed, with half of the top quarter maybe contributing to the wildlife site. So there is no off-site area located.
Right, you're wholly in control of the.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks. We got there.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just chewing on ideas about, you know, erosion control and, you know, the, how much erosion control gets left behind, like how long will it be on site, you know, and start, like I'm thinking about, ripping it up and pulling it out when the time comes, and if it wouldn't be better to do a biodegradable, and just leave it there, because by the time maybe the work's done, you know, tearing it up will cause the damage all over again, you know, and then just thinking about, you know, like the, you know, then the wildlife-friendly ones, the ones without the plastic, and you do the erosion control blankets, they come with, just the jute instead of with the plastic fibers in them, you know, because then they get caught up in the sleeves and all that other jazz. But that wouldn't be a relevant conversation necessarily if there was water coming in from off-site that they didn't have any management over.
Couldn't control.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'm chewing on those ideas, but.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the things, right now, the erosion controls that we have on the site is there's silt fence that's entrenched, and then there are straw wattles. I think the straw wattle is in plastic. I don't know if it's biodegradable
The
plastic.
straw generally isn't biodegradable anyway, so.
But, so pulling the erosion, the silt fence out, I know exactly what your concern is, because I think about these things all the time as well. Hay bales are worse in some ways. Oftentimes, we'll just pull the silt fence and we'll leave the straw behind, or the straw, they come in these 20-foot sections, you can pull the whole thing, or they'll cut the plastic with the straw in this, pull the plastic and leave the straw
Just
behind.
split stuff.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, the, you know, when they do what they actually do, they move in 3 years or 5 years or what. Yeah, the other, this ties into invasives as well, because straw often brings in things with it, you know, and so if we've got an invasives management issue going on the site that might be rolled in into the COC, then it might be worth sort of making sure that the erosion controls aren't necessary.
Not contributing to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right, so you're talking about straw wattles, straw or hay?
Well, both.
Hay brings in a lot,
Yeah.
is a lot worse than
Locally, the straw doesn't seem to, but in other jurisdictions, like California, for instance, when they do that with fire breaks, they have a lot of invasives who come in through the straw. So.
Yeah, I've seen the problem with the hay. I have not seen a problem yet on any of my construction sites with straw wattles with.
Right. Like locally, they haven't been an issue for that reason, but yeah, I'm an invasive guy. I get a little.
Locally here, you can get frag in the hay, so.
Yeah.
Even the salt.
Yeah, especially the salt.
Hay, you can get frag. So for a while, everybody was going for salt because it was supposed to be better than just
Not on those
field hay,
fringes.
not necessarily.
Not on the fringes,
No, not on
yeah.
the fringes.
Okay, I don't want to get too far off track here, we've got to get back focused. So we were on the enforcement, what do we got for a timeline now? Are we going for the meeting on the 15th, or are you going to try for something earlier?
Yes, we're going for the meeting. We can't wait. I'll work that issue out.
Okay,
I'll figure something out.
all right.
You might see a stand-in that doesn't look like me. But,
All right.
yeah, we'll figure that out. And I think, I would prefer to amend the original order
Again, I will leave
versus
that.
filing a new one, if that's okay. I just
I
think
will-
it's easier and it keeps everything in the same permit instead of having more than one permit.
If you have an option on process, you can use whatever option you
Okay.
choose to use.
So there's some activity that this enforcement order in fact orders.
Well, yeah, there's something it allows, and what I did is I just brought over the language. If you'll notice that those items are the same ones that I allowed to go forward within the cease and desist, so I brought them over into the enforcement. Because they still have, are you still working on your straw wattles? You were still, you're not, well, they weren't, the ends weren't mated properly. And by that I mean there was supposed to be a stake on either side of each tail, and I think you just drove one down through the middle, and when you do that, they tend to wobble around a little
Yeah.
bit. And those ends were only maybe covered by 6 inches, so I think we discussed that on the field, that it didn't follow your detail.
We had one of our engineers do an inspection this morning, and he's got pictures. I haven't had a chance to review them today.
Okay.
But we will submit another report and see. I know Eric has been working on them, getting, because we've been telling him that, and so we'll see where it is at. We'll submit this week to you.
Perfect, you get in the SWIP on this week, all right, thank you. Yeah, and they have been doing their weekly reporting, so we have a first and second report from them. They've been doing it, the engineering, Meridian's been doing a good job with it. Any other questions that you have for today? Is there any-
Filing's due on the 3rd or the 15th.
Yes,
I
you
just
have to,
want to get my.
because yes, your legal ad has to be on or before the 8th.
Do you have any other hearings prior, or I know we spoke about possibly a special hearing? Is that
Well,
an
if
option?
you-
If we can turn things around quicker?
If you can turn things around quicker, great, but what happens is you still need that time to advertise.
Yes.
So if you're gonna turn it around quicker, we kinda need to know now, and that's why I'm kinda drilling at it now.
That's
Because I need to get a quorum together also, it's kinda hard to call these guys up and say, can you be here tomorrow? So I can be,
So
but,
if we tried to,
And I know you haven't met with the forester until tomorrow, so it's
well,
kind
see,
of.
the problem is, if we moved it to a week earlier, to May 8th, then that would mean that the filing would have to be in on the 26th. That's like 10 days from now. That's pretty tight.
Yeah, so get a copy.
Pull together what we wanna
Yes.
do. That's what the concern is.
No, I get it. Sorry,
I'm
just
not
hearing the
sure
numbers
we
out.
can- I know, you don't have a calendar in front of me, that's why I pulled my phone out to see. But I'm not really sure that we can, I don't know that we can meet the 26th in order for a special meeting on the 8th. And I want to deliver a product to you that you will say, wow, this is really great, and approve it. Like, I don't want
I
to,
think that'd be a good idea.
I don't wanna do something that I was pushing for a deadline, trying to meet it, and it's not all there.
It's fine. You're not trying to accommodate me, I'm
Right.
trying to accommodate
But
you
I
at the
do
moment,
appreciate
so.
immensely that you would be willing to hold a special meeting for us. That's, I'm just not sure I don't think we can pull that off. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Let me keep it. That's one of my quick copies, yeah, one of my 2 copies. So if I can have that back, great, it makes some copies. Okay, yeah, that's good.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go to the site
should have you sign it, even though it isn't complete. There isn't much left to do on it.
Maybe it's just enforced,
No, there is nothing enforced upon them. At the moment, the only thing that they're under is the cease and desist. So they're under the cease and desist right now, and they can do the work that they could do under the cease and desist was reflagging and installing their silt fence and controlling their silt on site. Those are the two things they can do. Those two. No, but it will in this. It will mandate in this that they do that. And before it was really beholden on them to get that stuff in place so they don't have more damage than they already had to repair. So they were more than willing to get it into place.
Do they need an excavator?
What's that?
Do they need an excavator, or does it just make it easier?
That's a good question. You know, I would say they probably needed it. When you walked on that site, you walked about 20 feet, you got about 3 inches taller, just with the clay that would stick to your boot. It was almost impossible to shovel it. And what isn't clay is stone on that site, so it was tough. They didn't really need it for the straw wattle. They put the straw wattle down pretty good, and when I saw them, they weren't really using it. They were just asking. Originally, they were using Marafi, and they were trying to get the tails in, and it was just a nightmare. They just couldn't do it.
Hi, Doug.
Hello.
I know I'm probably not on the meeting, but you had talked to my wife about 11 Riverside Ave.
Yep.
And so I was wondering if that was going to be anything discussed on that?
There is nothing discussed on that, other than I can tell you that I had a talk with Tom Hughes today, Hughes Environmental, and Sawyer, Hughes, and there's one other individual that will likely be working on it. They're trying to get him to sign a contract now. He wants him to start right away. They want a contract because they don't want to get halfway through this process and have themselves bumped. I told them what some of my concerns were about the property down there and the installation, and so I thought it was a very positive sign that he's hired someone to help him move forward with this.
They've hired someone to take care of all that and
Yeah, and I was a little concerned because Fred came in, and I'm sorry to talk this way without the rest of the board understanding the issue, but Fred did come in about 2 weeks ago and grabbed a notice of intent, and I had a brief conversation with him. I know that it's over Fred's head. He's not going to be able to fill that order out like that. So I was really pleased to hear from Tom Hughes today.
And who's he?
Tom Hughes is Hughes Environmental out of Newburyport. He has a Concord office also, but he has done many of the revetments, the piers, the things that you see down in the basin.
Right.
So he's a professional. He does this for a living.
Right. Okay. The only other thing we had,
And what's he doing?
he's going to fix that problem that
He's going to attempt to permit
So he
them.
has to have all the permits to do that, though.
He's going to what?
He has to have, go for permits to do
Absolutely.
that.
He has to go through the process and get permits to do that.
And
Yes.
what does he do with what he has now?
That's up to them. I would imagine that little tiny rock is going to go away. It isn't going to stay there. I would imagine that
It's gonna go away how?
I don't know yet. I'm not making the plans. I don't tell them how to do it. They'll tell us what their plans are, and then we'll look at it and say, that's not a very good idea. That little stone's going to end up all over the place. So I try not to get too much into planning on them early on. That's not our job. It's up to them to come back with it. You're apt to see a lot of the little stone go away. It goes everywhere. It doesn't hold. You're apt to see the pier system go away. It's not going to stay there. The ice is going to take that out and rip that thing out every single year. It's going to do that. So you're apt to see more of the platform, ramp, float kind of thing that everybody else has. But I'm just speculating at this point. I know they want to go back with something. That's something that works. What he had obviously didn't work.
Yeah. And the other thing we were concerned about is the property when we came and had put up a fence because it was just looking at garbage all the time. He's now put in another trailer. He's got a trailer with no axle or tires. He's got another trailer, a second trailer that is down to the no
tires.
They're flat. One trailer has no axle. And then he's got 2 more boat trailers. And behind that trailer that's got no axles, he's got a pile of garbage. Just stacked up against my fence. And
Garbage, is it bringing in rodents? And-
I don't know, but they're
You should see
plastic
what's
bags.
underneath
They're
Well,
all-
listen, all right, well, look,
I'm sorry, there's jerry jugs, it's a fire
I
hazard.
get it. This is Conservation Commission. I
I know.
think that you have more issues down there than we have authority for.
Yeah.
And I think that some of your other issues, you may want to have a conversation with the Board of Health, and you may want to have a conversation with the zoning codes enforcement officer, which is the building inspector.
Okay,
So,
Sam, yeah.
yes, yeah, with Sam.
Yeah,
And so he may be able to address some of your other issues.
okay, so this is, yeah, I understand. I didn't realize that was that part, okay, so you got building and then.
And do we have some overlapping jurisdiction with some of that?
Right.
Sure, it's a resource area. You can't just pull everything that you can find and dump it on your yard down there. But that's a fine line too. We've taken people to court before for messes in their yard, and we haven't been very successful.
Right.
And I was just concerned because supposedly you got this permit for a garage,
That's something else, honey.
a one-story garage, you got the permit.
That's something else, yes.
I don't care. He doesn't store his cars in it, there's no cars in it.
Folks, this wasn't, I
I
don't
know.
mind speaking to you about this,
Yeah.
but it wasn't on the agenda, and I want to move on.
I
If you
understand.
want to come back into the office or give me a call this week,
No, we're gonna
please do,
be
and I
here.
can,
Okay.
we can discuss this.
All right, thanks.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
Take care.
okay, bye-bye.
So, and this enforcement order is not
Unbelievable.
binding at this point.
This,
We're operating on the CCC.
correct. Now, if we want to vote on the issuance of this enforcement order and sign it tonight, then I will polish it up. There isn't much left to do on it, but I would polish it up tomorrow. And then, one of the things I was concerned about was giving them orders that they couldn't fulfill, so that's why I asked about the meeting night, the meeting times, when they'd want to be here. But I think this is ready for us to vote on and sign tonight, and then I can issue
I
it.
mean, it's like it can be like a partial, I mean, you can come back and add on, or just have another one if you want to add more provisions.
Yeah, well, and once this does its job and gets the amended notice in front of us, then you can start to make those changes and condition that, because it's gonna be like any other, job before you. You're gonna be able to put those conditions on it.
I mean, I don't think we've had a lot of enforcement orders at this, where the.
In this magnitude, in this mess, no, we haven't.
It seems like complete and wholesale ignoring of every wetland.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of greed involved.
It kind of makes you wonder about going forward with the stuff that is already permitted. It's like, do you need some sort of independent monitor there?
That has been brought up, and that's a great question, and because because these folks don't have expertise in site management, it's something we talked about, was having Meridian have much more hands-on the project and have them out much more often. And I think you're gonna find that that's a common thread throughout the planning board, selectmen, and this board is gonna wanna have much more oversight.
Can we add that as a condition?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, I've seen projects where they had like an environmental monitor.
Sure. So I think we're to the point where I would entertain a motion to enforce on 131, 133, and 151 Scotland Road that they get back into compliance with the issued order of conditions before we move forward with other business.
So just to be the devil's advocate a little bit, having not issued the EO yet, they've obviously jumped, so to speak. They got the people, they're running around, chicken, etc. The character, the personalities involved. Would it be more useful to dangle an unsigned EO than it would be to sign an EO?
No, well, that's a good question. I suppose we could argue that till the cows come home. My gut feeling tells me to issue this and then to get them in the process and condition the amended order so that you you condition the amended order so that this work has to be accomplished prior to moving on. So that's what you heard me say to her, get you in compliance before we loosen up the rest of that order.
Right.
And it was one of the reasons that I'm very hesitant to let them grade that upper area and get it all done and all seeded. I think the more that you give them, the less they're apt to concentrate on this and to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's a personality thing, you know. If having the enforcement order just would like shatter, you know, the owner's pride, you know, then you can avoid, you know, it works, you know, it's, you've met those people. But if they're not that kind of people, then there you go.
Yeah, no, I don't think this is gonna, I think that he's taken this serious. I don't know that he did prior to this, but I think he certainly understands the seriousness of this, at least relative to the impacts that he's caused for himself. I mean, he wanted to be open this summer. That doesn't look like it's gonna happen now, so.
Yeah, his face was great. He did not like being here.
Sounds like, so we do the conditions, you move, and that just means that there's order to do the work that you put in the letter.
They are ordered to file the amended notice of intent, is what we're ordering them to do for the restoration of the disturbed areas.
So must we vote on that? And they must prevent silt.
Yeah, they also.
Exactly. They've got to control their silt on site, which I go to what they did immediately. I mean, they went right out there and started installing that stuff. So I don't want to give them too many kudos. They caused it in the first place, but once they did get
It
right.
Sounds like a phone call that I'm like, you did what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and really, you know, the problem, it doesn't sound like it's any of these people, it's the loggers that, you know, are vanished back up to the North Woods somewhere.
Well, it's the loggers that do this kind of stuff. I mean, it usually is, but in the long run, it was one of the things they asked me. They asked me if I had any intention of throwing the net over the logger. And I said, no, I realize I can do that, but no, not really. It's up to you to control the logger, and I think that from a legal standpoint, it would have helped them.
Right, and it's an air-client relationship, yeah.
Were the loggers and the heavy equipment construction, are those local companies, or were those companies?
New Hampshire companies.
New Hampshire.
It was kind of funny. It was hard to tell whether the trailer there said Vermont on it, but it was actually a New Hampshire company that.
Maybe more so with landscapers.
Graham Hill.
Okay, I don't know.
I think was the logger.
My experience, landscapers, more maybe with logging companies, but are frequent violators. You know, it's as much the landscaping firm as it is the client.
Well, it seems like the areas they went into were the areas where there was big, when I say big, 20 to 30 inch old growth oak. Where they didn't go in was farmed 25 to 40 years ago. It's all 4 to 6 inch trees, so there was really no incentive to get off you know.
That's part of my worry is how are we getting at the restored, mature, mass producing hardwoods?
Yeah, not gonna happen.
You don't, you know, you just can't, you know, put those trees back. That's the trouble.
Well,
and that's the trouble.
change
And that's the
the
trouble they're going to have when they go and they face the planning board for the site plan review and selectmen for the selectmen's permit, for the special permit. And that's why I was saying that our stuff is a little bit more cut and dry because restoration's a little more cut and dry on our end than it is this screen that they're not going to be able to replace.
I understand that, but I mean, shading, the function provided by a mature overstory is.
I get it. Temperature and everything else is big, I know
yeah,
that.
I mean, it's not like you can just plant 8-inch diameter stuff and it's gonna do the same thing, it's not.
But what you could do in this context that might be interesting is say, pick a species or whatever, like, I don't know, smelt, right? Like, you can just say this was smelt breeding swamp or whatever, you know, make all this stuff obviously. But, and go to and say, well, this was an upland mature breeding swamp for smelt. And then go over to the new growth smelt breeding spots and say, all right, you know, if this is what it was doing before, this is what that place looks like in a young perspective. Let's target this as our restoration goal. You know, because, you know, the Concom isn't gonna be filing and
You
watching
do the best
for
you can,
100 years.
and you hope what it'll look like in 25
Yeah, you know, and if we pick a goal target rather than some, you know, just restore it for me.
I think that's good advice, Brian, and I think that's obtainable.
Right, but it's also not necessarily jurisdictional. You know, we would have to be asking them nicely, because, you know, within the context of the WPA, that kind of conversation isn't part of the paperwork. So.
Just the question is, now that the area's been logged, and you can see what was there, you really couldn't see what was there before. I mean, is there any way, are there any things that are a surprise there? I mean, I haven't seen, you know, that are, wow, I didn't think that was gonna happen with all the trees being down.
No, it's a little more rugged back there on the edge that they disturbed than I thought it might be. It's really pretty out there. It's a shame they ate it all up like that, because you can look into the woods, there's some, you know, some big granite outcrops and things like that. So
I'm just sort of thinking, you know, maybe if there's stuff out there that needs to be, that you unanticipated that needs to be addressed, maybe you can get some improvements made that you might not have.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, no, I think that the only thing they're probably gonna end up doing is probably gonna end up asking to use more rock in more different places. I don't know where we talked about that rock tonight, the contractor rolled it down the wrong hillside. There's that jurisdictional wetland, then it goes up like this, then it goes back down, and then you have the non-jurisdictional wetland. Well, the non-jurisdictional wetland was where all the riprap was supposed to be. So what did he do? He pushed it up and over the hill and he rolled it all down to this one. So they've got one heck of a mess. You can hardly climb over it and climb through it, that mess that they've got down there now.
We went half an hour before we start setting off burglar alarms, just so you know.
Okay. So let's get back to this target here. Does anyone have an issue with enforcing upon them that they write a amended or a new notice of intent for the restoration of the disturbed areas?
This isn't giving anybody permission to go in there really quickly beyond what they have right now or anything like that.
I think, well, it's too early to discuss that, but
Okay,
this is only.
You were talking about stuff in the points. And
Yeah, all as I'm trying to do here is make them come up with a plan for the restoration.
Yeah.
We don't even have anything to talk about yet. If they want to use equipment, we're gonna have to take a look at what they want to use and for what
You would put
purpose.
conditions here in your letter, and those will still apply.
Those will still apply here, although, you know something, I could, I already did in here, but if the small machine is giving you some heartburn, that can come out because the silt fence is done. They don't need that small machine in there, so I'll pull that if that makes you feel comfortable.
I would feel better.
All right.
I don't know how everybody else feels.
No, that's great, doesn't matter any, that's fine, I can do that.
Yes, but Doug, you said there's the non-jurisdictional wetland. What kind of wetland is it? Is it just like rain puddle wetland, or?
Yeah, well, that's a good question, I don't know whether it's.
Has anyone gone looking for peepers?
What isn't stone, Mark did have some pictures, but those pictures were for a vernal pool on the other side, so I don't think there was any evidence of that down below.
Maybe as part of this, you know, some kind of double check.
Let me tell you what else I did while they were out there. They decided to connect with a trench, the non-jurisdictional wetland to the jurisdictional wetland.
What, didn't you say there was a ridge between the two of them?
You heard me.
Well, yeah. No.
You heard me.
So did they just make it jurisdictional?
Yeah, that's it.
We can talk about it.
Sure did.
We'll see, when the plan comes in, we'll take a look at it. But listen, we keep digressing.
Now I'm very happy that I said take out that small equipment.
We keep digressing, well, they didn't do it with a small piece of equipment.
I don't want any piece of equipment.
We keep digressing into the plan that we don't have yet, and discussing the plan we don't have yet, so.
I only digressed a little bit because I wanted to make sure that, you know, if there was any jurisdictional issue that shouldn't be rolled into this EO. It should be its own EO if it turns out to be something and they didn't really do a good job or any of that. That's all. I just didn't want to, you know, muddy the EOs.
I got you. I think that the restoration for the non-jurisdictional is no different though, and we'll roll it right into this. They're willing to do that. They're not looking at it any differently. If they pulled up something like that, yeah, I would agree. We'd have to split that difference and say, well, yeah, we don't really need to talk about this.
Anyway, but yeah, let's sign your paperwork.
Yeah, okay.
Are we gonna wanna do
I
something?
thought you'd never say that.
Do you wanna do a vote? Or you just
Aye.
sign?
Alright.
Aye. So I will entertain a motion to sign and issue the enforcement order.
Second.
All those in favor?
You sign it?
I did sign it. Thank you. Les. You know, the older I get, the more keepers I need.
Nobody can read it.
Yeah, really, I could sign it twice, it wouldn't matter, would it? All right, let's get out of here before we start putting the alarms off. We have a request for a certificate of compliance for DEP number 50-1063 from Lawrence Kinnon at 330 High Road. That was a small addition off to the east side of his house. It was up on post, even though it didn't need to be. I went down there and did a site visit today. It was done in substantial compliance, and it would be my recommendation to the board that we grant the certificate of compliance.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Is that Larry's file? That's the pink one that you couldn't.
I wasn't in there.
Oh. It's before Brian and after.
He's safe. Brian Collins.
Oh, there you go. Sign this one yet, Russ? No, you good. Next. Yeah, that's his folder, yeah. We have a request for an extension permit from Janice Forrest at 72 Old Point Road for DEP number 50-1005. She's got a little bit of work to do left around her driveway. The house is done, everything else is done. So it would be my recommendation to grant the extension.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Is this her? Or is this she? What time's this place alarm? 10 o'clock?
Yeah. So,
That's all right, I got the codes for it anyway, so.
Oh, you do?
Oh, yeah, I know how to shut it off, so if it does.
He probably also has a phone number for the police.
Where did Jim Cunningham move to?
Salisbury or Seabrook? Salisbury or Seabrook, yeah, he was looking at houses up that way, I think it was Salisbury.
His house was still there, I mean,
No, it's all, as a matter of fact, we got a little bit of concern about it because they pulled off some of the doors and the windows and they took the cellar door out, so it's kind of an attractive nuisance at this point, so it really should be cleaned up and closed up, or torn down, one or the other. But right now, they got the cease and desist, so they can't really do much.
I had no idea until I saw the minutes, he was off, he moved out of town.
One more, guys, this wasn't down here, but it came in. We have a request for an extension permit for, and you might have heard Mary talk about it, the town landing, the harbor master for DEP 050-1061, and it would be my recommendation that we grant this extension. All those in favor?
If we don't do it, I mean, it'll make him do it sooner. I'm ready for this country punks to go away.
Really? Sorry, no extension for you. What are you gonna do about that time of year
I
extension?
know, right? Let me resign, right? Let me take care of the timing of the end of this time of year restriction. Oh, man. Yeah. Dear God.
It's a good question. No, they didn't order the wrong ones. What they did is they moved forward in a direction that they thought would be the best. And what it did is it just took all the dysfunctions that that pier had and just made them new, and made them new dysfunctions. So you had a ramp that was going down like this. You've got a pier that's coming out like this. So at low tide, you've got people that are trying to walk off their boats and keep them up against the pier. And people falling off the pier, they get pinched. The driveway came down, and you might have heard her, and then the pier went off like this. So people are pulling straight down here, and then they're way away from the pier here. This floating system will give them just about perfect working conditions at any tide. It's a much better system than what they've got. You know, I guess it was a good thing that they were delayed and they didn't get it in the configuration they were going to put it in.
I totally roughed your ankle there.
Did you really? I don't doubt it. Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourned.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.